Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase, pricing, and availability questions concerning this watch. Today, we're discussing one of the latest versions of the Hublot Spirit of Big Bang collection. So this is the Hublot Spirit of Big Bang King Gold Ceramic with a combination of a ceramic black bezel and the distinctive red King Gold alloy that is Hublot's answer to Panerai Oro Rosso, the Ever Rose of Rolex, and the Sedna Red Gold of Omega. And it does have a great deal of intensity to it. Now, this model, as you see it right here, like all Spirit of Big Bangs, first launched in 2014, they're riffing on Richard Mille. And Richard Mille, who launched his first watches in 2001, was riffing on the then most popular independent watch brand, Franck Muller. So in a lot of ways, this is a profoundly mutated evolution of Franck's original 1980s Centre Curvex case. So speaking of other brands, it's what's inside that counts. This is the best of both worlds with Hublot style and a Zenith El Primero movement. So let's talk size. At 42 millimeters, you cannot consider it to wear like a round 42 millimeter watch. So looking at the other dimensions, it's quite broad at 53.5 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip with a thickness that's actually quite reasonable at 14.2 millimeters. Now throwing it on my wrist, a couple of things work in my favor. First, you can see that the case back is dramatically arced. Second, you can see here we have a rubber strap that's pretty flexible. So when I put it on my wrist, it looks big, but it does feel secure when it's cinched down, and it actually looks fine. Proportionally, I think you're good to go. If your wrist is my size, 16 centimeters circumference or larger, particularly if you're a fairly large man overall, this is going to fit and sit just fine. So 16 centimeters circumference wrists and up. Now it is weighty, having a substantial amount of gold. The timepiece is actually kind of satisfying in that regard, because many Hublot watches of sapphire, ceramic, and titanium feel almost toy-like. So if you believe a luxury watch should have some weight to it, game on. Now, since roughly 2019, Hublot has updated the Spirit of Big Bang to include a push-button quick-release system for the straps that first debuted on the Big Bang Unicos. Now, the nice thing here is that you get the ability to change the look. So you have this quasi-camo look in textile and rubber. The watch also comes with a black and red rubber strap, so you can swap and change the look. Now, no one's going to lose you in the bushes with this camo, but I do have to say that something about it matches the rose gold and the black of the bezel quite well. I think this is the more natural fit of the two straps that came with the watch, at least aesthetically. Taking a look at the buckle, you can see it is actually made of blackened titanium, and then externally it has rose gold, or we should say King Gold, and twin trigger release. So you press the trigger and it opens. You have to press both of them, so it is quite secure when closed. You can see the inside, the chassis of the buckle is actually the Hublot H, and then we have this system with two securing pins where you tuck the strap into and under, and then once sized down, it's clean. All the excess length is under the strap. There's no need for minder loops. If you're wondering, what are minder loops? Well, they're these things. This strap does not need them because of the architecture of the clasp. Now, we have plastic inserts in profile, polymer, they call them. We also have rubber atop the two chronograph pushers. We have a multiplicity of finishes. You can see Hublot now features an Hublot H on the crown, which sports satin brushing and media blast, and then the case features satin brushing, but also polished highlights that are quite attractive. They really do pop against the satin and the matte black of the polymer inserts. Taking a look at the crown, it is a screw down. It does have a rubber knurled shoulder. The watch is 100 meters water resistant. The bezel includes a couple of different finishes. You can see in profile, it has satination and polish. Here's the satin channel across the top, and then the recesses are media blasted. The screws fixing the bezel, they're titanium. They feature polish and media blast, and again, that Hublot H. Now, of course, this is riffing on Richard Mille, and the premise here is that if you don't want to pay RM money, you can get the Spirit of Big Bang, and it looks almost the same. And that's actually a fair proposition, because have you seen what RMs sell for? This is the rare thinking man's Hublot. If the alternative is an RM10 or an RM1103, this is actually the thinking man's alternative, and I never thought I'd say that about an Hublot. Now, the dial is fairly complex. It's open and primarily a vitrine for the movement, which sits largely visible underneath cantilevered hour indices, hands at center, and a second sapphire that features some of the dial elements, such as the scales for the registers and the Hublot logos. There are two superimposed sapphires, only one of which, the upper one, is obvious to the eye. We'll do a loom shot. And you can see the watch is fairly easy to see, including the chronograph registers, which I find appealing, although you will note the chronograph seconds hand is not luminescent. This being a Zenith El Primero caliber 400, there are a few classical El Primero elements, one being the oddity of how they set. The watch sets with the crown in the intermediate position. So that's how it sets. Then you pull the crown out all the way, which is where most watches set. This is where the El Primero accesses its quick set mechanism. You can see the jumper up at about 1030 on the dial. You can see that the disc for the date has been fully skeletonized, and look carefully. Between 4 and 5 o'clock, you can spot the current date. The hands feature satination, which makes them easier to view against the dial, and then everything underneath the hands and the registers has a combination of brushed and media blasted grayscale texture and tone. All the screw heads are polished. Again, 100 meters water resistant. On the back, you can see that although the El Primero dates back to 1969, it's still big enough to hold its own against a case of this size. Now, it's a bidirectional automatic winder with a 50-hour power reserve. It has the company's famous 36,000 vibration per hour beat rate and pivots on 31 joules. Because it does have that high beat rate, when the chronograph is running, you can see that the chronograph seconds hand is smoother than on a conventional chronograph. And because it has 10 beats per second rather than the conventional 5, 6, or 8, it allows you to measure increments as small as 1/10 of a second. That's always been part of the premise of the El Primero. The other being that the higher beat rate makes it potentially less susceptible to deviation when shocked, concussed, or vibrated on the wrist. Now here you can see we have a column wheel function selector, which is super crisp to the touch and to the ear. And then we have a lateral clutch adjacent to it. This is a very traditional layout and a beautiful one. A lot of automatic chronographs are ugly because they hide the entire movement under a rotor and a winding bridge, whereas on the El Primero, the winding bridge is barely there, allowing you to see both column wheel and the clutch. And in addition to that, you can see all of the levers and the hammers that are part of the reset system of the chronograph. The finish is industrial but handsome. And if you look underneath the balance, you can see one of the recent innovations on El Primero movements, the addition of an unlubricated full synthetic silicone escapement, both the anchor and the wheel, reducing friction and reducing maintenance requirements, both welcome in the modern era. And then if you look, you can see how the movement is anchored to the base plate, or to the plate that binds it to the watch itself. This is HUB 4700. Hublot has a proprietary name for the Zenith movement, but take my word, it is an El Primero caliber 400. So you get the best of all possible worlds, an RM look at an Hublot price with Zenith watchmaking. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.